Okay, I think everything's falling into place. Can I actually get this started on time? I think I might for once. However, even if I start on time, still good to give people a chance to file in for a minute, so we'll just wait for a couple of more minutes, give people a chance to get in here if they want to. Absolutely no obligation from anybody to come to this kind of thing, but we'll give them a chance to come anyway if they want. After all, we're going to kind of have fun today because we're doing something different. Different things are good. So we'll just check out everything, make sure everything is in place. I think it is. Been a hectic morning. But I did some good research. I put everything together, organized as best I can, we should be good. So, I think this is where I'm going to go ahead and get started, so let's go ahead and turn off the starting soon. Boom, gone. Hello, Shadowcat back, and we're doing something a little bit different today. Normally I would cover like a particular topic, something, philosophical, something socio-cultural, political, something like that. We're going to do something a little bit different today. And the reason we're doing this is because I was particularly inspired. I know, it doesn't happen very often, but I was particularly inspired for this one. So just a little bit of backstory. I didn't get to grow up with Pokemon. When I was in school, Pokemon was just coming out. So I was, let's see, I would have been in like junior high school, I think. No. Well, yeah, I would have been in late elementary and junior high school when Pokemon was coming out and really starting to get big. Of course, I didn't have the cards. And when the video games came out, I sure as hell didn't have those. I never even had a Game Boy until I was in high school, and by that point, they were already on to like the Game Boy Advance. And I got finally one of the big gray bricks, and I had Tetris, and I loved it. And it was the only game I ever had. So, yeah, that was my whole experience with the Game Boy. And so, obviously, Pokemon went through all of its different iterations, and I never got to play any of them. However, I own a Nintendo Switch now. And so, when Shining Pearl came out, Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, I said, you know what? I've never gotten to play a Pokemon game before, and I am an adult. I get to say what I play now. And so I got it. Boy, was that a mistake. Yeah, nobody told me that, like, it was really hard. I thought it's a kid's game. You just go around and you catch monsters, and then you fight other monsters, and then you stick them in your pocket. That's why they're called pocket monsters or Pokemon. No, it's actually super hard. You get through the gyms okay, that's fine. Then you get to the end with the Elite Four and Cynthia. Yeah, it's super hard. I can't believe they made this for children. At any rate, though, one of the things that I noted, and if you want to go back on my channel, you can watch my Pokemon Shining Pearl playthrough. But one of the things that struck me was, there's going to be spoilers in here, okay? I'm going to put that out there. Okay, there's going to be spoilers today. Should I put that up there? Should I put a thing on here that says spoilers? Maybe I should. So let's see. Text. Spoilers ahead. And we're going to do this, and we're going to say, what is the text? Spoilers ahead. There we go. And we'll just put that right there. Because there are going to be spoilers here. So if you don't want to be spoiled on games that are like 15 years old, or one particular game that is like only a year old, because we will be going all the way up through Scarlet and Violet. So if you don't want to be spoiled in Scarlet and Violet, I'll give you a warning when we get there. As for everything else, well, you tread at your own peril. So anyway, now that that warning is up there, Pokemon Pearl. So it takes place on the island of Sinnoh, which I believe all the regions in Pokemon are supposed to be a representation of a certain area in the real world, and I believe that if I remember right, Sinnoh is supposed to be the equivalent of Hokkaido in Japan, which is why the top of it is absolutely frozen solid, because that's Hokkaido most of the year. Anyway, though, you go through this area, you fight gyms, you catch Pokemon, you do all the stuff that you would do in every Pokemon game. However, the big bad guys, who are Team Galactic, and we'll talk about them more later, but they're trying to catch these legendary Pokemon. I guess that's what they do in every game. I'm not sure. I've only played 2 so far. I played Pearl and I played Violet. But one of the things that struck me, and I actually sat down and did the math on this one in one of my videos. I don't remember which one it was, but it was definitely in my series. They blew up a lake. And when I say they blew up a lake, I don't mean that, oh, they tossed a bomb in the lake. I mean there was a lake there one day, and the day after, there was a smoldering crater. And no more water. And I as soon as I realized what had happened, because the entire island shook when they did this, that was your clue that, oh hey, you need to run to this next lake now. The entire island shakes, you get there, there's no water left. I'm like, how big of a blast would you need to vaporize an entire lake? Like, dry. And as it turns out, after doing all of my math, Team Galactic is out there trying to catch legendary Pokemon for, some reason, but they're packing tactical nuclear weapons. And I'm just like, why are you trying to catch Pokemon to, I don't know, rule the world or whatever, when you're already packing nukes? And that got me thinking, what are the other teams doing? And so, with a little bit of help from somebody else who I work with regularly, Blizzard Star, go check out her channel, who has been playing every single Pokemon game as they've been coming out, and knows far more than I do. I started learning about the other Pokemon teams. And we're going to discuss them because, some of them I was just like, oh, well, so you just want to rule the world? Well, I mean, that's pretty standard villain fare. That's kind of mustache-twirling villainy there. But I started looking at some of the other villain teams and realized that, hold on a moment, this seems familiar. Like, really familiar. So, without further ado, I think we should get into it. And we'll see just how far we get through this. So first things first, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning of Pokemon. Now, I am no expert on any of this Pokemon stuff, but I do think that maybe it's my outsider perspective here that's going to give us a little bit more insight. And we're going to start here, and that is all up in the way. Let's make this a little bit smaller. Nope. There we go. That looks better. Alright, so, for those of you who have played Pokemon, this is probably familiar. For those of you who haven't, this is Team Rocket. Now, Team Rocket, I think everybody actually knows. Mostly from the cartoon series and, stuff like that, but I guess this is what they look like in the actual game. They look like a couple of thugs, which is basically what the villains are in every game. You see their lieutenants and their street thugs out and about, they challenge you to Pokemon battles, you beat them, they run scampering off back home. It's pretty formulaic, but they at least get different reasons in each one. So this is Team Rocket. What does Team Rocket want to do? Well, I don't know about the cartoon so much, but in the games at least, their motivations are pretty simple. According to Bulbapedia, which is what I have used for basically everything here, see, Bulbapedia, and we can look at these if we want, but Team Rocket in the games often work to gain money through methods such as burglary and selling fossils. Their plans culminated in a hostile takeover of the Silphco building in Saffron City. The gang based their operations in the hidden basement of the Caledon Game Corner. Okay, so whatever. The important part is, what did they do? They were burglars, they were thieves, they were, they were bad people, willing to do bad things to get ahead. Well, that's not exactly unrealistic, actually, for a group that, exists in a cartoon game. All these guys are doing is committing crimes to get money and power. They're taking what they need, and they're using what their ill-gotten gains to amass themselves more power. In this case, taking over another company. Well, we've seen that before. We know what that is. We're talking about the Pokemon equivalent of an actual organized crime syndicate. No different than, say, the Italian Mafia, the Russian Mafia, the Yakuza, the Triads, any of these large organizations who don't just seek to, have a little bit of territory and make their way. No, they have aspirations for grander schemes. They're not interested in just controlling, say, a territory. They want to have the territory. Then they want to own the businesses there. And they want to own the utilities there. And they want to expand into another territory and take over everything there. They had grand ambitions to get all of this done. Team Rocket were mobsters. And that's all there was. Now, obviously, they weren't driving around with Tommy guns or anything, although why you would need a gun when you have Pokemon, I don't know why you'd want that. You have a gun already, in a ball, and it shoots itself at whatever you point it at. So yeah, Team Rocket, not that hard to understand actually. And you have to understand that when it comes to Pokemon, a lot of games will take a simple concept and they'll dial it up to 11. Because they want to make it, bigger, bolder, grander, more hyperbolic. Pokemon is still a children's game. So instead of turning everything up to 11, they turn almost everything down to 5. So, whereas the actual mob would go out and do anything from intimidation to actually torching people's buildings. They would commit arson to send a message, or they would just kill people and leave the bodies out to be found. Obviously, you're not going to get that in a Pokemon game. They're going to tone it way down. However, just because they turned it down doesn't invalidate what they are and what they represent. Which is the entire reason why I wanted to make this video, because I realized that Pokemon was actually a cautionary tale. It was actually trying to get out there and send messages. I mean, sure, it may have used these people for inspiration. Maybe it used them to, say, organize their villains. But every single villain group we see is representative of a real-life group. And it can warn you to stay away from those groups. As if you really needed more warning. But trust me, we're going to get into some pretty heavy subjects. So anyway, that's Team Rocket. So then what was the next game? And that was Ruby and Sapphire, if I remember right. Actually, no, I have it right up here. It is Ruby and Sapphire. And Ruby and Sapphire were kind of special because they actually had 2 teams. However, both of the teams kind of were the same, but opposite. Let's get into it. This is Team Magma. And I'll be honest with you, of the 2 teams, I like these guys more. I like their hoods. I want that hood. Anyway, this is Team Magma. And Team Magma and Team... what was the other one? Right, Team Aqua. Okay, so Team Magma and Team Aqua are not terribly complicated to understand. Their entire thing is there are two legendary Pokemon in the world. In Pokemon or Ruby and Sapphire. And both of the Pokemon do one very specific thing each. You have one that removes water and raises land in the world. The other one does the opposite. It sinks the land and raises the water. And so we have the classic kind of pirates versus ninjas thing going on here. Obviously, Team Aqua are the pirates. If you couldn't tell. And then I guess these guys are supposed to be ninjas, which is why they're Naruto posing. And I see that Blizz is in the chat. Hello, Blizz. Good to have you here. I just want you to know that you're responsible for this whole lecture. Everything here, for like the next hour and a half, it's all your fault. You did this. So anyway, the entire goal in Ruby and Sapphire is that these people wanted to wake up their particular legendary Pokemon, and they wanted to expand. So Team Magma, obviously, had a large and powerful force on the ground. Not so much on the water. So their option was, instead of taking over the water, why don't they just remove the water? I mean, as far as plans go, it's not the worst plan. I mean, eventually everybody's going to die because there's no water left, but hey, who cares about long-term thinking? The other side of that was, of course, Team Aqua, who wanted to sink all the land masses because, well, they were all kind of based on the water. Presumably they had boats. They're pirates. I assume they had boats. The odd thing is, actually, their plan kind of works better. Because you can feed yourself from the water. You can go fishing. I don't like fish, but you can go fishing at least. You remove all the water and, well, you got about 3 days left. But I was thinking about this, and these guys, like I said, everything is turned down to 5. So, who do these guys represent? And Bliss says they have subs. Okay, that's fine. Subs are just boats that go underwater. I'm still right. They just didn't have, big pirate sails on top of their subs, presumably. So anyway, who do they represent? Well, actually, I thought that was a pretty easy one. Because regardless of which team you want to look at, what do they want to do? They want to expand. It's all about territory. Take the territory. Take it from somebody else, take it from nobody else, doesn't matter, just expand. And then I thought about it, it's like, yeah, that's exactly what they are. They're expansionists. They're imperialists. So while Team Rocket might have been representative of, say, organized crime, a group like the Mafia or the Triads, Team Magma and Team Aqua were representative of an entire nation. Actually, we're talking like the British Empire. We're talking about Imperial China. We're talking about the Russian unions. And I say unions because they tried that more than once. It wasn't just the USSR. But any of these nations who actively go out, press on borders, start territory wars, and take over smaller nations. That is basically Team Magma and Team Aqua. The end goal being, of course, that they want to take over the whole world. Or at least, control the world enough that nobody challenges them anymore. That's the goal. Now, did it work? No. Has it ever worked? Also, no. British Empire was the most successful empire in the world, and look at where they are now. Still, though, when it comes to Team Rocket versus Team Magma or Aqua, honestly, they seem kind of kind of chill. I cannot see Team Magma or Team Aqua really bothering normal people that much. They have loftier goals. Now, whether their goals are good or bad for people is debatable. Probably not. Empires tend to go poorly. And even if they do start off okay, they tend to get worse over time. Regardless, though. That's Team Magma and Team Aqua. So then we move on. After Ruby and Sapphire, we moved into Diamond and Pearl. Now this, of course, is the one that I have arguably the most experience with, except for maybe Scarlet and Violet. So I do have a few things to say about them. Obviously, as I pointed out, I don't know why these guys are collecting Pokemon when they have a warehouse with tactical nukes. I don't know. Their entire goal was actually to kind of take over the world, but it's like, you could take over this world. You have nukes! Not sure if they're the strongest Pokemon team we've seen so far or not. But anyway, what did they want to do? Well, actually, the story for Team Galactic is a little bit hard to tell across one game because it technically requires you to know both games to understand what they're trying to do. So Team Galactic's goal is actually kind of simple. They want to rule the universe. Which is, that's some Wile E. Coyote stuff right there. They want to rule the universe. However, they are at least somewhat knowledgeable enough to realize that ruling this universe is going to be really, really, really super hard. Because, yeah, it is. The odds of them taking over the world were pretty slim, much less taking over the solar system, or the galaxy, or all the galaxies. So what did they want to do instead? Well, every Pokemon game has its legendary Pokemon, and Diamond and Pearl had Dialga and Palkia. Dialga, of course, was the legendary Pokemon god of space, and Palkia was the legendary Pokemon god of time. You put them together, you get space-time. And somewhere in the world, Albert Einstein just went, "What? What did you say?" I said space-time. And then what can you do with space-time? Everything. Literally everything. The mastermind in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl wanted to use the Pokemon to create an alternate dimension, fill it with space-time, create an entirely new universe, and be the god of it. Which, in terms of master plans, that's kind of a lofty one. Yeah, a little bit. I mean, who doesn't want to be god? I just feel like Arceus might have had something to say about it. But at any rate, as we pointed out, Team Rocket was all about that whole mob life. Take over the area, get money, get power, all that. I'm going to keep it relatively family-friendly here, but there's other ways that we could have phrased that. And the other two, Magma and Aqua, were all, imperialist nations trying to take over the world. So what about these guys? These guys aren't interested in the world, they're interested in something else. They're interested in creating their own dimension, and they're interested in just basically ruling over it and all the people and places inside of it. Now, interestingly enough, when I thought about what does this represent, I had a bit of a problem because, well, nobody in the real world is trying to take over the universe. Even Skeletor wasn't that ambitious. But interestingly enough, I did find a parallel. The only problem with that parallel is that this game way precedes it. Now let's see, when did Diamond Pearl come out? Let's see if we can find that out real quick. Diamond Pearl. Let's see, Team Galactic, Sinnoh region. Okay, I don't see it there. Hold on. Let me check this on another browser. let's see. Pokemon Pearl release date. Okay, Pokemon Pearl came out in 2006. Are you feeling old yet? It's alright if you're feeling old yet. So, the comparison that I came up with is almost 20 years, it's almost 20 years after the fact. But when I thought about it, I thought about this. They want to rule an entire universe. What universe could they rule over? And while the dates might not line up, the intentions actually do. See, nowadays, there has been a massive explosion in virtual reality technology. You have people like Elon Musk who want to use brain chips to interconnect people. You have people like Mark Zuckerberg who want to create an entire virtual world. That's why he started Meta. Make an entire virtual world where entire populations of people can live, work, and play. Instead of going to an office and commuting there, you would simply throw on a headset and log into a virtual office, where you could do computer work inside your virtual office, hold virtual meetings at an actual conference table, things like that. Zuckerberg wanted to make an entire world. An entire virtual world. Or really, let's be honest, an entire virtual universe for us to inhabit. And again, Elon Musk wanted to do kind of the same thing. Interconnect everybody so that maybe you wouldn't necessarily be wearing a headset, but with your brain chip, you could be, doing something in the real world, but you could also exist in a virtual reality if you wanted to. Either way, it would put you inside of another universe. Literally, another universe. But unlike this universe, where depending on whatever your faith is, maybe you believe that God is over everything, maybe you believe it's Allah, maybe you believe that there is an entire pantheon of Shinto gods who are watching over everything and keeping it moving, or maybe you believe the entire universe rests in the back of a turtle. Whatever you believe, this universe exists independent of any of us. But a virtual reality universe would be at the literal fingertips of somebody like Mark Zuckerberg. It is right? I think Zucker and Zuckerberg are two different people. At any rate, the Facebook guy. The one who looks like a lizard person. And might actually be a lizard person. We can't prove that. So, allegedly lizard person. When you really think about it, the goals between these two are not that far off. The big bad guy from Diamond Pearl wanted to create an actual universe, they want to make a virtual one. But either way, whether it was a real one or a virtual one, you would have one person, just one, who would wield absolute, unchecked, unlimited power in this universe. And so again, while it is about, say, 17 years after the fact, the parallel there is uncanny, and it does kind of make you wonder if the other games were trying to, warn us about ideologies and practices that are, either wrong or harmful. Was maybe Diamond Pearl a look into the future, seeing what could happen, and trying to warn us against that? Perhaps it's giving them too much credit. But even if it is, I think it's credit worth giving them. I'm willing to let them have this one. Because maybe even if it was unintentional, they seem to have nailed it. They seem to have nailed it just so perfectly. They did a phenomenal job with that. So, where does that take us to next? Well, Diamond and Pearl had very, very lofty ambitions. Then we moved to Black and White, and Black and White had much more grounded and, unfortunately, much more terrifyingly realistic villains. So Black and White takes place in, of course, another region, and the entire idea behind Team Plasma was very simple, actually. Team Plasma, and I think I'll just go right back here and read it to you from here. They were the villainous team from the Unova region. Originally, the Grunts were a cause that resembled Knight's Armor, which I do believe was this. Go. Do it. Something like this, anyway. That's kind of knightly. But they wore something that resembled Knight's Armor while the Seven Sages wore robes. The objective was to separate humanity from Pokemon. And that's all you really need right there. Of course, they used Pokemon in all their exploits, because it's a Pokemon game and you use Pokemon for everything. But their objective was to separate people and Pokemon. And that involved stealing the Pokemon from people. This meant that you, as a trainer, they would battle you and try to take away your Pokemon. Spoiler alert, they failed. But it also meant that they would go around to just normal people and just take their Pokeballs. It seems pretty innocuous. I mean, it's still wrong, still bad, and, you know, you're still hurting people by taking their partners. But they're not physically hurting anybody. They're not causing great amounts of collateral damage. However, I say that because, well, their real-world counterparts did. Because at the end of the day, we actually do have a word for what Team Plasma are. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. If you haven't, here's your education for the day. Team Plasma are eco-terrorists. If you haven't heard that word before, allow me to give you just a very simple definition. Most people are aware what terrorism is. Terrorism is the use of fear and violence to change a political ideology or philosophy. The idea being you're not having a debate, you want to make somebody too afraid of the consequences to act against what you want. Either you're intimidating them to not oppose you, or you're intimidating them to do something for you. This is the root of terrorism. And it's a very broad umbrella because it can be applied to very many things. In this case, eco-terrorism refers to somebody who uses terrorism to the benefit of the ecosystem. Basically, we're talking about eco groups, like, say, I don't know, pick something. I know. What's the one with the big panda on the front? I should know this one. The World Wildlife Federation? I think it's the World Wildlife Federation. Something like that. But imagine them, except they firebomb things. That's eco-terrorism. And we do still see that nowadays. It hasn't gone away. It's not usually very prominent. It's never been very prominent. However, one thing that I can almost guarantee that everyone is familiar with would be one of the greatest, one of the largest, one of the most influential animal rights groups in the world, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Almost everybody knows PETA. And maybe you know them because of some of their more violent work. Maybe you know them because of some of their more stupid work. After all, if you remember, it was PETA who came out and launched campaigns against, what were some of the games that they launched campaigns against? I think they launched one against a game called Cooking Mama, which was a Nintendo game where you would cook. That's it. You would cook. You would cook sandwiches. You would cook soups. You would do things like that. And they didn't like it because it used meat. And so they did an entire campaign against it. They have hated for the longest time games like Mario because they say that Mario shows animal abuse because you jump on turtles and mushrooms. Because these people think that walking mushrooms are animals. And they probably also feel bad for Bowser too. But you know, this is why we don't take these people seriously. Oh, and I might have forgot to mention, they also kind of have a hard-on for a game called Pokemon. Maybe you've heard of it. They despise Pokemon. And part of me actually thinks that these guys might have been a direct reaction to PETA's campaigns against Pokemon. But they're far from alone, because while PETA does manage to keep up a shiny facade to hide all the nasty, evil, violent, dark, and evil things they do, I want to share something with you. This is just a simple Google image search for a group called the Animal Liberation Front. Now, maybe you've heard of these people. Maybe you haven't. But in case you haven't, remember how I said the World Wildlife Foundation plus, you know, firebombing places? Yeah, these are the guys who actually do firebomb places. The Animal Liberation Front are the ones who will go through and literally destroy pet stores because they believe that pet ownership is wrong. And so they would get together enough people, and they would wait until the cover of darkness. You can see that these people are all bullets and balaclavas, just all the way. They would go to a pet store after it had closed, smash all the windows, go in, they would open up every cage, remove all the animals from it, and then burn the building down so that it could never be used again. They also have a very nasty reputation for going after things like medical labs, who use anything from mice and gerbils to dogs. Now, while I will admit that I'm not the biggest fan of animal testing, and I do feel bad for the animals, we have animal testing to thank for things like insulin. Like, do you know anybody in your life who is diabetic? Yeah, they're still alive because of animal testing. And if it weren't for animal testing, they wouldn't be alive. And these people here would like to see who the diabetic in your life, they would like to see them dead for benefiting from animal testing. When we're talking about eco-terrorism, these guys put the terror in it. Now, as I stated before, Pokemon turns everything down to 5 instead of up to 11. So these guys are not that bad. They are not going through and burning down Pokemon centers. And they're not killing people who walk around with Pokeballs. But the fact remains that they are, in fact, the same. These guys are wearing balaclavas over their face. These guys have berets and masks. They're both wearing armor. They're both wearing gloves, boots, everything, you know, don't leave a trace. They're the same groups. And so I do think that this was Game Freak's way of taking a shot back at all these animal groups who had a hard-on for Pokemon. For what it's worth, though, they weren't the only ones, because Black and White were kinda unique when it came to Pokemon games. They were unique in that they were the only game, I think, with a sequel. So it's worth noting that in the games, of course... Oh, hey! Flame is in the house. Hello, Flame. So in the games, of course, it says that they wanted to separate humanity from Pokemon. Okay, that's fine. However, later on, yes, in Pokemon Black and White 2, Team Plasma split into two different factions. One of them consisted of a few members of Team Plasma still loyal to N, the other faction, the new Team Plasma, led by Colress. That part actually isn't important. What is important is this. This faction is not attempting to release Pokemon, but instead to simply take over Unova. Now, how they intend to do it, I guess, is by, they say freezing the region and then stealing all the region's Pokemon. So it is kind of still the same. But more importantly, they're no longer interested in taking the Pokemon now. No. They've had a better idea. Why bother trying to act outside the law and take people's Pokemon when you could simply be the law and take people's Pokemon? That second group, well, they weren't they weren't eco-terrorists anymore. They weren't the Animal Liberation Front. They weren't the Environmental Liberation Front. They weren't PETA. No. They took it one step beyond, because they weren't just an they weren't just an activist group anymore. No, now they had become an actual revolutionary group. And when I say a revolutionary group, you have to understand what I'm talking about. I'm not just talking about, these people you see in college who chant, yeah, we should have a revolution. No, I mean the actual revolutionary groups. I'm talking groups like the IRA, which is the Irish Revolutionary something, I think. Either way, the IRA, they blow things up. It's actually kind of a big deal, because when they were at the height of their power, and they were at the height of their activities, the IRA had gotten a reputation for blowing up buildings so much to the point that actually the government had petitioned the IRA not to stop. They realized that they could not stop the IRA. They petitioned the IRA to give them warning, at least, to prevent further civilian casualties. And so it was that the IRA did not stop their bombing campaigns. They would simply give an hour's worth of warning ahead of time so that any civilians could be out of the area, because the government couldn't stop them. But they also weren't willing to give in to their demands, and so the IRA would continue to blow places up. Now, eventually they did fail. They never actually took over Ireland. They're still around, though, and they do still sometimes get into trouble. I see Jeffrey's in the house. Hello, Jeffrey. Similar to the IRA, but more successful than the IRA, I'd like to look at the Cuban Revolution. The Cuban Revolution by Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. Now, both of them were revolutionary leaders on their own, but it wasn't until they teamed up that they were able to lead a revolution against the Cuban government, and they won. They were very successful, and Fidel Castro ruled over Cuba for a very long time. And he turned Cuba into an absolute hellhole along the way. Under Castro's rule, civil liberties were non-existent, civil rights were non-existent, human rights were basically non-existent. He was a despot. The only rule in Cuba was whatever Castro said. And the entire nation of Cuba basically died of starvation and sickness, while he lived opulently in some of his many, many palaces. He was also really hard to kill, because the US government tried to kill him many times, and he survived every single one of them. He's either very good or very lucky. And then, if we wanted to get to an even bigger scale, I thought I would cover things like the, I thought it would cover the Russian revolutions, because Russia is no stranger to revolutions. Russia has had more revolutions than I think any other country in history. Basically, Russia has a bad track record when it comes to leadership, and the only way they know how to take care of it is to just revolt against their leadership and just, behead them. The point is, though, all of them have the same thing in common. They basically said, we're done. We're not doing anything more, and we're taking over the country violently. We're not asking anymore. And that's basically what Team Plasma turned into. They said, you know what? Even if we can't take all the Pokemon away from people, if we can take over the nation, then the people will have to submit to us, and we can do it that way. Now, I don't think they ever stated that too clearly in the games, but we can fill in the gaps between. They still wanted to collect all the Pokemon. It's just now they opted for a different approach. We instead of acting outside the government, we become the government, we become the police, we take all the weapons, and then we disarm the people. Because let's face it, Pokemon are weapons. And what does every dictator do as soon as they seize power? They seize all the weapons. So it actually kind of works in two ways. I hadn't thought about that before, but it does work in two ways. They get to fulfill the whole eco-terrorism thing by taking away everyone's partners, and they get to take away everybody's guns at the same time. There you go. Team Plasma. Despots in training. So let's move on. Now the next one, I swear, when I was putting this together, I forgot these people 3 times. Because I made the list first of all the teams, and then I forgot them. And then I went through and I filled in the objectives for all the teams, and then I forgot them again. And when I tried to find examples of all these people, I forgot them a 3rd time. But they are... Team Flare. Team Flare are from Pokemon X and Y. And ostensibly, they seem to be pretty good guys. Team Flare have a very, very generous objective in the game, because they don't want to hurt anybody. Team Flare's entire objective is to create a utopian society for everybody. They want the world to be beautiful. They want the world to be fair. They want bountiful supplies for everybody. They want everyone to be happy and to thank them for it. They're looking for adulation here. They want props. And we can even prove that. You back up a little bit. Yeah, they claim to be making the world beautiful with style and lots of money. Now, of course, it says, despite their claims, their grunts and even some of the leaders confirm that they would seek a world benefiting only those within Team Flare, disregarding anybody else. Now, of course, it says they attempted to make money by stealing and selling fossils. They also siphoned energy from the Kalos power plant and later on stole Pokeballs from the Pokeball factory. Now, why do we want to talk about these guys? Who are these guys? Before we get any further, let's think about who are these guys. So they have money. They have influence. They want to make the world a better place. Primarily for them. Who could they possibly be? Well, if you hadn't got the social commentary from this one, we're basically talking about every single billionaire, for the most part, on the planet. Pretty much anyone with enough power, money, and influence has said these words at some point. They want to make the world a better place. Of course, they're all doing it in their own way, and it's odd, it's weird how every single time these people try to make the world better in some way, it always seems to benefit them a little bit more than everyone else. At best, sometimes it benefits them a lot more. Sometimes it's like the only person benefiting from it is them. And I knew somebody was going to say it. Flame said it. Elon Musk be like, yeah. I knew somebody was going to say Elon Musk. I think Elon Musk is actually one of the more benevolent ones. But I ain't going to deny that, he's still got shades of that. But we can also point to not just wealthy people, but also wealthy groups. And I'll get into that in a minute. Because if we want to go back a bit, it's eventually revealed that Team Flare's true plan is to use the ancient ultimate weapon in order to obliterate all life except for themselves and start anew, as Lysandre could no longer see a bright future for the current society, which in his words had grown to an unsustainable level and was doomed by unproductive fools consuming the planet's limited resources. Oof. Big, big oof. Now, we're going to be getting into some pretty heady current events here, because those words are a major bone of contention right now. Especially when you have groups like the World Economic Forum, the Davos Group, the G20 Summit. All of these places where you have attendance by none other than the most elite of the elites. And what do these elite of the elites have to say about the current state of the world? It sounds terrifyingly familiar. Because when you listen to them talking at these conferences, they say the same thing. That the Earth is overpopulated. That the Earth is currently down an unsustainable path. That we're heading into an energy crisis that cannot be solved. Not by our current technology and not with our current numbers. There's even people, individuals, like Bill Gates, like Klaus Schwab, who have come out and said that the human population needs to be controlled. Otherwise, it will breed itself into extinction. And of course, when they say controlled, there's only two ways to control a population. You either sterilize it to prevent further growth, or you cull it to prevent the resources from being overused. Almost like using some kind of super weapon to wipe them all out. It didn't take me long to realize that there is an absolute parallel here. Team Flare are one of these organizations. They are an investment firm or some kind of intergovernmental agency or whatever it might happen to be, where, let's be honest, we don't necessarily know where they get all their money. We don't know why they have so much power and influence, but for some reason, every government in the world seems to listen to them. Every single government in the world seems to give them deference, and they all seem to have some kind of objective where, in the name of their grand plan to save the world and make a better world for the future, it means that you are going to have to either suffer or disappear. Either way, it's bad for you. These are the same people who keep talking about things like 15-minute cities. What is a 15-minute city? Well, a 15-minute city is very simple. The idea is that it is a small city with a fixed population, and it is designed in such a way that everything you need, your school, your work, your doctor, your police, your groceries, your hardware, everything you need is within a 15-minute walk from wherever you live. Or, slightly less if you ride your bike. The idea being that if it's a 15-minute city, and you can get anywhere in 15 minutes, well, then you don't need a car. And so we can save the environment when people no longer need to have cars. Of course, if they can say that you don't need to have a car, they can also say that you don't need to travel. Of course, if you don't need to travel, then you don't need to have any reason to leave your city. If you don't have any reason to leave your city, then why are you trying to leave your city without permission? And Flame says a 15-minute walk? Yeah, that's the idea, 15-minute walk. Well, you can walk for 15 minutes, right? And if you can't, well, you'll learn then, won't you? So the idea of 15-minute cities has been criticized heavily, and in my opinion, justly, because it really sounds like an excuse to segment a population and then prevent them from moving. Everybody will be assigned to their city, and then you don't leave your city. Why would you need to? It would be like keeping animals in a pen. The animal might want to leave the pen, but why would you allow the animal to leave the pen? After all, what damage could the animal do if it left the pen? No, 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 no. You must keep them in their pen. And then again, if you have too many animals, well, then you'll just have to get rid of some. Kind of like what Team Flare was proposing. Team Flare is basically a cautionary warning against any kind of single organization who claims to know better than the entire world. Not a government, not some kind of benefactor, but somebody who has absolutely no authority to do so, but thinks that they can do so. And Flame says, this is all nice and all, but being able to reach everything in 15 minutes sounds like a really small city. Like actually a town, unless it's all skyscrapers. And yeah, that's because that's basically what it is. Not only would you have everything within a 15-minute walk, but in order to keep the population up, we're talking about high-density housing. In other words, you wouldn't have a house. You would live in apartment units so that you could fit a whole bunch of people into one building. Let's not forget that the World Economic Forum and people like Klaus Schwab are the ones who have famously said, "You will own nothing, and you will be happy." Team Flare doesn't want people to own things. They also said that you will live in the pod. Team Flare wants you to live in the pod. And they also said that you will eat the bugs. Although in this case, I guess that would be bug Pokemon. And I'm not eating a bug Pokemon because it can fight back. And I think it could win. Stupid Heracross. So yeah, that's Team Flare. Team Flare are basically the equivalent of the World Economic Forum, the Davos Group, anything like that. Anyone who thinks that they are superior to the rest of the population and they know better. And Jeffrey says, what about fires? How will it be handled? Well, of course a 15-minute city is going to have a fire department. Obviously it would have a fire department. The question that you need to be asking, though, is, why would they care? I mean, you care. It's your home. Your neighbors would care. It's their home, too. But why would the people who stuck you in the city care? Sure, the fire department's going to come. The fire department will put out the fire. Maybe some of the building can be saved. But they don't care if you're displaced. They locked you in the city to begin with. They're not going to care what happens to you once you're in the city. It's going to be Escape from New York all over again. You go inside the city, they put the wall up, and then you just stay there. You stay there because why would you ever want to leave? No, you don't get to leave. They get to leave. You don't get to have a car. They get to have a car, though. You don't get to leave your city. They can go to any city they want. Because they're better. Because Team Flare is better. And eventually, of course, Team Flare resolves that, you know what? The rest of the population is really unnecessary. Because there should only be the best people here. And they are the best. And maybe, just maybe, the world would be a better place if they got rid of everybody else except for them. And if that's where Team Flare was heading, kind of makes you wonder what some of the people of the G20 think of the rest of humanity. If that keeps you up at night, congratulations. You're starting to catch on. Speaking of on, let's move. The next one was Sun and Moon. We're going to get a little bit more casual here. I mean, we just talked about world domination and, global extinction events and things like that. We're talking about, totalitarian groups that were controlling governments and everything else. We're leaving that behind now. We're now moving on to Team Skull. And Team Skull, well, honestly, compared to what we just had to deal with, Team Skull are a lot less in every way. So Team Skull spend their entire time in the game just kind of going around and harassing people. If we wanted to look at what they can do, Team Skull. So they are the primary villains in the Alola region. By the way, the Alola region would be Hawaii. So they finally came to America. The black and white uniforms inspired by street gangs and consist of sneakers, shorts, wristbands, tank tops, bandanas cover their face, and berets that resemble the tops of skulls. And we pretty much already got it right there. Team Skull's intentions are to simply make enough money to survive. They have a history of disrupting island challenge events. The team's leader once attempted an island challenge and failed. Basically, yeah. You see what's going on there. Here's the thing. Team Skull are just thugs. Team Skull is a street gang. Literally, that's all they are. There's no lofty aspiration here. They're not trying to take over a town, a city, a state, a country, or the world, or a new universe. They're just a street gang. All they really want is to get everything to survive. Jeffrey says they're just the school bullies. Actually, no, they're not. We're going to get to that, but you're jumping ahead. You just hold on to that thought. It's going to come up later. No, they're just a gang. So think of any other gang. Crips and Bloods, MS-13, what are some other ones? I wrote some down here. Latin Kings. Things like that. They're just a gang. All they care about is territory and supplies. They're not even trying to take over necessarily the businesses in the area like an organized crime would. Team Rocket wanted to control the businesses. They took over a business and then set up their headquarters in the basement. These guys, they're not even trying to do that. They're lying, they're cheating, they're stealing. They're not murdering, but I mean, it's a Pokemon game. But they're doing everything they can to get by. Flame says that the true villain of X and Y, the poor people. And you know what? Or no, wait, the Sun and Moon. The true villain, the poor people, you're not wrong. They actually are. They're literally just the poor people who banded in a gang to survive. Now, is this a cautionary tale? Actually, yeah, it still is. They are still a gang, and gangs are dangerous. Gangs are dangerous to the people around them. They're dangerous to the people in them. Joining a gang doesn't make you safe. They might say it does, but, I mean, you're in as much danger from your own gang members as you are from another gang. No, they were an absolute real-world inspired team here. And that's kind of all there is to say about it. I mean, that's it. They're a gang. What else do you want to say? I got nothing else. Now, while I don't have a whole lot to say about them, the next one on the list, oi, this is going to take a while. Okay. If they look familiar, it's because they are familiar. We started with these guys, and now we're up to this. They are not Team Rocket, they are Team Rainbow Rocket, and I'm not making that up. I swear I'm not making it up. Team Rainbow Rocket is the further extension of Team Rocket, and they're a little bit different. So Team Rocket, as we already established, they're an organized crime syndicate. Their entire thing is money, power, territory, control. So first you move into an area, you secure it as your territory, you push out any other organized crime that's there. In fact, you push out pretty much any crime that's there. Then you start taking over the crime yourself. You start doing the petty theft, you start doing the burglary, you start doing all of that. Once you've got the resources, then you start taking over businesses, then you start taking over utilities and functions, anything from the power company to the police station, and you cement yourself in power there. We've seen organized crime do this in the past in real life. We've seen it in the US in like the 1920s when organized crime was a really big thing. We saw a resurgence of it through like the 80s, and we see it in other countries as well. Any country where you know the government is just absolutely corrupt, or that, you cannot go to the police because the police do the bidding of whatever mob happens to be there. I mean, that's what we're talking about. That's Team Rocket. But this is Team Rainbow Rocket. Now, Team Rainbow Rocket, they also appear in the Alola region. How? I don't know, because we already had Team Skull. Regardless, though, in the games, Team Rainbow Rocket's intention is to create an army of Ultra Beasts in order to conquer all the worlds. The group is led by Giovanni, of course, same person, who has recruited the leaders of all of the other villainous teams from alternate universes where they were actually successful in their plans. So how can we possibly find a real-world equivalent in this? Actually, we can. And the clue to it was in that line. A team made up of all the leaders who were actually successful. As we established, what does an organized crime syndicate do? They take over. What do they do once they take over, though? Well, if you had an organized crime syndicate who was successful enough to take over a city, well, that's great. They've taken over one city, though. What stops them from doing another? And if they can do 2 cities, how about 3? 4? 8? 16? What if, and follow me here, what if they could take over an entire state? And we see that. I made a point that there are nations out there that are so corrupted that the government isn't actually in control of the nation. I would go so far as to say Mexico is one of them. It is no secret that Mexico is by and large run by the cartels. Now, of course, they have a government, they have a president, but how much control do they actually have? The answer is, realistically, not a lot. Oh, I need a drink though, so quick break. Much better. So, Mexico. The cartels are everywhere. And the cartels are larger in number. They are better armed, better equipped. They have more intelligence. They are more powerful than the Mexican government. And with power like that, they use it. The cartels in Mexico do pretty much everything except for directly write the laws. Now, I say directly write the laws because the cartels absolutely have members of the Mexican government either in their pocket or they have them by the neck. And they can make them do pretty much anything they want. I mean, a really famous example would be El Chapo. If you've heard of him, you know who he is already. If you don't, El Chapo was the head of a major cartel. And he was arrested several times. Why was he arrested several times? Because he kept escaping. And how did he keep escaping? Well, he escaped, I believe, 2 times before he was eventually shipped off to the US, and now he's being held in a place where he absolutely cannot escape. But before that, he was held in Mexico. The first escape, he walked out the front door. Okay, it wasn't exactly that easy. However, what had happened was the cartel had gotten people into the prison. Or they had gotten the guards to do it for them. I forget exactly what happened, but what had happened was the guards, whether they were real guards or, the cartel wearing guard uniforms, basically went to his cell, removed him, cuffed him and everything else, made it look real authentic. And then they just walked him out the front. They put him in the boot of a car, drove him out somewhere, and he was free. Then they caught him again. What happened then? Well, they put him into a higher security prison. And then the cartel dug a tunnel, like 1.5 miles long, I think it was, from a nearby property that they owned into the prison. And once they had tunneled into the prison, they just broke through the wall and took him out. And when I say tunneled, I don't mean they had to crawl Shawshank Redemption style through this little tunnel. It was big enough that they could ride like a little dirt bike through there. The cartel is absolutely more powerful than the Mexican government. And so that's what Team Rocket basically turned into. Sure, they might have been defeated here or there, but they never went away. They kept biding their time, they kept amassing their power, and then, when they were powerful enough, they went to all of their rivals, which in this case involved, dimensional travel and all that, but they went to all the other groups, Team Magma, Team Aqua, Team Galactic, Plasma, Flare, Skull. Well, maybe not Skull. But they went to all of them in other dimensions who had been successful and said, you know what? Together we have enough power to take over the world. And so they did. That was their entire thing. They made their goal to take over the world. They said, alone, we may not be strong enough to do this. Together, though, if we form an alliance, we can take over the world. And how? How might you ask were they going to do that? Well, you already read it. The Ultra Beasts. What is an Ultra Beast? I don't actually know. I assume it's like some kind of really super special, powerful Pokemon. Because everything is a super, ultra special, powerful Pokemon. The point is, though, if you watched my, my Pokemon, no, not Scarlet. Blizzard's doing Scarlet. If you watch my Pokemon Violet video, just recently I encountered a Pokemon called Electrode. And out of curiosity, I looked up how dangerous would an Electrode be if it exploded. Turns out that if an Electrode exploded in a Pokemon battle with you standing, say, 2 meters away from it, it would kill you. And that was self-destruct. It was only afterwards that somebody corrected me and said, actually, there's a move called Explosion, which is the big brother to, it's the big brother to self-destruct, and it does even more damage, to which I just kind of went, oh my god, Pokemon are lethal. Like, so very, Very lethal. And by the way, Electrode, and I think it evolves into Voltorb. Pretty sure it evolves into Voltorb, if I remember my Pokemon right, because that's one of the original ones. That's just a regular old run-of-the-mill Pokemon. There is nothing special about it. Nothing. It is a bog-standard Pokemon that almost everybody will see, fight, catch, stick it in their box, and never touch it again. It is a regular bog-standard Pokemon, and it's about as powerful as a whole pile of C4. So what about these other ones? Well, I did a little bit of research, and I looked through, some other Pokemon to compare. You have other Pokemon like Charizard. Charizard's big thing is Flamethrower. I looked up how strong it was. Flamethrower is actually powerful enough, and this is just a regular Charizard. Not Charizard X, not Mega Charizard or anything like that. Just regular old Charizard can liquefy, can almost evaporate what was it, I think? I think it was like a 6-meter disc, 2 inches deep, of solid granite. And I just mean gone. I don't mean deformed. I don't mean it kind of started to melt down a little bit. I mean it's just gone. There's no more stone there. And Blastoise, those cannons are stronger than a water jet cutter. I mean, it would kill you, but it wouldn't knock you down because it would just go through you. And your body wouldn't move. That part of your body that it hit would just be gone. That's how powerful normal Pokemon are. These guys didn't even have that. These guys had these Ultra Beasts, which could, theoretically, I don't know them and I haven't done the math. We're talking about Pokemon who could potentially erase a city. That is a weapon of mass destruction. That is literally a walking nuclear weapon. And it's here, now that we understand what we're dealing with, that we can start to properly place who are Team Rainbow Rocket and who are they supposed to represent. Their goal is not complicated. They want world domination. They're not interested in expanding their borders. They don't want to say, well, everything is now part of our nation. They just want every single other nation to bend the knee and submit to them. And they are willing to use weapons of mass destruction to do so. Well, we have plenty of examples of that, actually. And why don't we go back to the internet's favorite punching bag? Why don't we go back to Nazi Germany and the Axis of Powers? See, Giovanni and Team Rainbow Rocket gathered together all the other leaders from every single team in history who was in their alternate dimension successful. Nazi Germany, of course, got Fascist Italy and Imperial Japan on their side. So, just like Team Rainbow Rocket, Nazi Germany had their own alliance. And what was their goal? Literally to take over the world. And they made a pretty good show of it, of course. They took over most of Europe. They took over most of Southeast Asia. They didn't win, of course, thankfully. But they still did. And what did they do to do that? Well, what started off as just a pretty conventional war turned into an arms race to end all arms races. We started in World War I with biplanes. We ended in World War II with jets. We started in World War I with mortars. We ended in World War II with the V-2 rocket. And let's not forget, the actual first nuclear weapon. Now granted, the nuclear weapon wasn't in their hands. It was in the hands of the Allies. But depending on who you talk to and what their interpretation is, Nazi Germany had been working on a nuclear weapon. They had their own spies in the US. They had been sending information back, and they were working on their own hydrogen bomb. The United States got there first. But it would not have been that much of a stretch for an alternate history to show that Nazi Germany could have gotten there first, and what might have happened if they had. Similarly, the USSR, the Union of the Soviet States of Russia, I think it is. I don't know, I could be wrong about that. Something like that. But the USSR, the imperialist, expansionist, communist nation that wanted to take over at least all of Asia, if not the entire world if they could manage it. And again, they made a pretty good show of it. They took over most of the eastern bloc of Europe. They were expanding south until they hit Afghanistan and realized that was a bad idea. And they realized it too late, but yeah, don't go into Afghanistan. Nothing good ever comes from going into Afghanistan. Stop doing it. But yeah, that's basically Rainbow Rocket. They are the alliance of authoritarian nations who want to take over the world. And they think that they can do so through sheer power. And they might be onto something. I don't know. I didn't play the game, so I don't know how that ended up. I'm assuming that, since it is a Pokemon game, you won. How you won? I don't know. But you did, somehow. That's all that's important. Good triumphed over evil. So that's Team Rainbow Rocket. Next up, we're going to, similar to what we did after Team Flare, we're going to take a step back. We're going to take a step back now. We're not talking about world domination anymore. We're moving on to Team Yell. And I know, it's like, what is even going on there? This is Team Yell. Now, it's actually very similar to what we did before. Team Flare led into Team Skull. You had world domination followed by street gangs. Well, we had Rainbow Rocket who wanted to take over the world with the use of weapons of mass destruction, and now we've got these guys. Team Yell aren't even a gang. Team Yell literally have one purpose in the entire game. That is, you see her? Pretty sure it's her. They worship this idol. She's like a performer or something. Performer, musician, something like that. I don't know. It's not really important. The point is, they basically live, eat, breathe, and sleep that girl. To the point where they will go out and they will harass people who try to get anywhere near her. If there's any kind of competition, they will try to sabotage the competition so that she wins. They will basically do anything to make her life better. And yeah, and basically prevent her from having to do anything. Blizzard Star says Marnie. I'm just going to assume that's right because Blizz knows more than I do. In terms of Pokemon villains, these guys seem pretty tame, right? I mean, all they're doing is worshipping this idol and trying to prevent anyone from getting close to her because, she's special. Pretty tame. Until you realize that it's not. It's really not. Because while I did have an argument over this, I did win my argument, I think. But I argue that these guys are representative of a cult of personality. Now, what is a cult of personality? Because I've had to explain that to several people now. A cult of personality is basically this. If you've ever heard the Ten Commandments before, you probably heard that number 1 is thou shalt have no God before me. That's because when you do have a God before you, this is what happens. A cult of personality is a cult formed around a single person who has been elevated to, I don't want to say a superhuman status, but they have been elevated above the rest of humanity. And I see that Tux is in the house. Hello, Tux. You're late. You get detention later. We have seen cults of personality in history, and I had to do a little bit of research into this one because I needed to have good examples, and I've got them. The first example, of course, that I came up with was Charles Manson. If you don't know who Charles Manson is, a very brief rundown. Charles Manson was, of course, one of the patriarchs in the Manson family. Very charismatic. Very charismatic. He was able to attract people to him without even the slightest amount of effort. And these people were fiercely, fiercely devoted to Charles Manson, to the point where they would literally kill for him. And they did. Now, Charles Manson was a person that was, I don't think it'd be that hard to say he was deeply flawed, mostly insane. He was also, he was also a racist. He was a white supremacist, and he believed that there was a race war coming. And so he sought to kind of amass his own army and start the race war. He called it Helter Skelter. Now, while he did mass a lot of people to him, he never quite got the army he wanted to. And eventually, after enough people died, his group was tracked down by the feds and he was arrested. But the point is that the people that were following him, they kind of fought back against the feds because they were willing to do anything to stop him, or to stop them from taking him. Similarly, there's a few others that are even bigger than Charles Manson. I know you're thinking, it's like, what? Bigger than Charles Manson? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Maybe you've heard of a little thing called Waco. If you're from the US, you're probably familiar with it. You've at least heard the words. If you're not from the US, you might not have. However, Waco made international news, so it's possible you might even be familiar with it there. Waco was considered a cult of personality because, let's see, what was his name? I've got it written down here. I think it was down here, wasn't it? Yeah, it's right here. It was David something. David Kopesh, I think. Let's see. Where is it? I should have taken better notes. No, David Koresh. Yeah. So, it was David Koresh. He created his own group called the Branch Davidians. They were ostensibly a religious sect who worshipped David from the Christian Bible. Now, I don't know a whole lot about them. It's actually not that important. What is important, however, is he started his own religion. And in doing so, I mean, that was fine. People start religions all the time, believe it or not. Jeffrey says, thank goodness I haven't taken off the armor from last week. Oh no, trust me, it's not going to save you this week. So David Koresh had started his own religion, the Branch Davidians. And of course, you know, as with any religion, You need to gather your flock. He found people who believed the same thing as him, or at least believed in him. And the more people that he accumulated around him, well, the higher his status got, until eventually the people came to revere him. And I have to make that distinction because you will find churches and temples and synagogues and mosques, things like that, all over the place. But what you'll rarely find is any church or mosque or synagogue that actually venerates either the priest, the imam, or the oh, why can't I think of the word? The rabbi. Okay? The leader of this group is not the one who gets venerated. It's supposed to be the ideas, the faith that is venerated in this place. The Branch Davidians, not so much. While they were on the surface just another offshoot of Christianity, David Koresh was being venerated as some kind of prophet or saint or whatever it happened to be. Now, they didn't actually do anything, and that's what makes them a little hard to compare to Team Yell. Because Team Yell would go out and they would harass people and sabotage things. The Branch Davidians really didn't. The Branch Davidians had their compound in Waco, Texas. And for the most part, they kept to themselves. That being said, however, then came the Waco incident. Because people had been saying that there were a lot of bad things going on. They were talking about things like physical abuse, sexual abuse, polyamory, child sex, things like that. And whether that was true or not, we actually don't know. And we never will know because of what happened. What we do know is what the response was. And the response was that the ATF had been called in because they had been stockpiling, weapons and supplies. They had their little commune there. They had their compound. They had their fort. And people were just like, well, hold on a second. Why are you gathering all these weapons? They called in the ATF. For those not in the U.S., that is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They were mostly concerned with that last one. Of course, when they came in there, the Branch Davidians had told them to go screw off because, well, Second Amendment. It is not illegal to have a gun. It's not illegal to have a lot of guns. It's not illegal to have an entire armory. You cannot be charged just because they suspect you might be doing something wrong. But they came in, they said, we have warrants for the arrest of, basically everybody. We're here to execute them. And they said, no, we've done nothing wrong and we refuse to be harassed. What happened next is a matter of debate because nobody really knows. And we will never get a straight answer about it. We're not sure who fired first, whether it was an agent from the ATF or whether it was one of the Branch Davidians, but somebody fired. And as soon as one shot was fired, many shots followed, and at the end of the day, many Branch Davidians were killed, and so were 4 ATF agents. After that, the ATF said, we're done here, and they massacred the Branch Davidians. And when I say they massacred them, what happened is they moved in force. They then proceeded to fire tear gas into the enclosed building. They broke out walls, they broke out doors, and they just kept throwing tear gas inside. Now, what you don't understand about tear gas is that tear gas is not breathable. That's kind of what makes it awful. But also, not only can you not breathe tear gas, but because it is a gas, it displaces the oxygen in a room. So when you throw it into an enclosed space, as the gas expands, it fills the room with tear gas and pushes the actual atmosphere out. It is suspected that the ATF was responsible for killing the majority of the people inside the building through suffocation. And at some point in all of this, we don't know how it started or who started it, the building caught on fire. And so anybody who was still alive inside the building, if the tear gas didn't kill them, then either the heat, the smoke, or the fire itself probably did. By the end of the day, there was almost nobody left. Now, why do I bring them up in this discussion when they sound completely different? Because while the Branch Davidians were rather peaceful, they were still willing to kill and die for their group and for their leader, much as Team Yell would be. There is one more, however, and if that wasn't a good example, the next one is. And that's because the next one on there was, let's see, well, where is he? That would have been Jim Jones and the People's Temple. Now, Jim Jones was an actual cult of personality. Like, there was nothing that Jim Jones really did, or there was nothing that made him special, except for the fact that he was extremely charismatic. He was good looking, he was suave, and people just wanted to be around him. He had that magnetic kind of personality. And he wanted to have a cult. He knew what he had, and he wanted to make his own kind of civilization. When you hear people talk about a cult of personality, you hear people talking about, oh, you mean one of those things where, like, you have one guy surrounded by an entire harem of women? Jim Jones is the one they're talking about. He attracted people from all over the place, women and men. But one of the big things about the whole People's Temple was that there was a rule that only he was allowed to breed with the women. Men were not allowed to have wives. He was trying to make his own... I'm not even sure what you would call it. Flame says, I feel like every celebrity's got one. You're not wrong about that. Team Yell is basically every single celebrity fan club and stuff like that. But what we're talking about here is when it goes to the next level. We're not talking about just a fan club. We're talking about an actual cult who worships a person and would kill to defend them. As far as Jim Jones and the People's Temple, I don't know how many people have heard of the People's Temple, but I'm sure that a lot of people have heard of the Jonestown Massacre. And so I have this little thing pulled up here. I'll read it to you because I can't put it on the screen. It says the Jonestown Massacre was an event in which 918 people died, including over 300 children. It was a mass murder-suicide orchestrated by Jim Jones himself, the leader of the temple. The members of the cult were brainwashed and coerced into following Jones, who claimed to be a messiah figure. He had been previously involved in fraudulent activities and had a history of mental instability. The event at Jonestown is considered one of the largest losses of American civilian life in a deliberate act prior to 9/11. Yeah, Jonestown was actually also the origin of people drinking the Kool-Aid. Yeah, and somebody got that. Tux got it before I got to it. Jonestown tea. Really good Kool-Aid. So basically, what happened was he would go out and they would kidnap people. Like, they would go out and they would try to attract people to join the People's Temple. And sometimes they would, just because he was that kind of person. Other times, however, they would actually go out and they would kidnap people to bring them back. Usually, virile young ladies. And once they were in, they would be brainwashed. They would be refused certain things. They would be coerced. And if they didn't buy into the brainwashing or the coercion, they would be punished, until eventually they would just give in. And they defended their temple viciously. People who would lose family members and try to come in and get their family members out would be encouraged to remove themselves, and if they didn't, they would be removed by force. And if they fought back, it could be deadly force. The Jim Jones cult of personality had been responsible for many instances of violence. And so when I looked at Team Yell and I said, well, what do these guys do? They follow a single person. They believe this person is elevated in some way. She is higher above everybody else and needs to be, worshipped and protected. And they go through, assault people who try to get near her, sabotage any competition that might try to challenge her. Again, I have to remind you that Pokemon is real life turned down to 5. If we turned it back up to 10, though, what are the lengths that these people would have stopped at? I mean, would murder have been off the table for them? I don't think so. And so I do believe that Team Yell would have been a cautionary tale about cults of personality. People who are so invested in worshiping a single person that they actually become dangerous. And while, a Pokemon game isn't going to tell you how to deal with this, what it can do is warn you that these people actually exist. So, okay. Now, that's Team Yell, and Team Yell were the stars of Sword and Shield. That is the last Pokemon game to come out, so, as I promised I would do earlier, this is your spoiler warning. I don't want to chase people out. However, if you have not played Scarlet and Violet yet, which is the current Pokemon game, and you want to experience the star path in there by yourself, this is your warning. Okay? I'm about to spoil 1/3 of the entire story in Scarlet Violet. Alright? Spoiler warning is out there now. This last chance. Alright? We're moving ahead in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You had your chance. Okay. Team Star are the kind of goofy villain team from Scarlet and Violet. When you first meet them, you meet them at the academy, whichever academy you happen to be at, because the stupid name changes depending on what game you're playing. And you first meet them when they're trying to recruit a student. So you come up the stairs and you find 2 of these Star Goons up there, and they're just saying, yeah, we have quotas to fill. So they're trying to get this person to join. When the person says no, they say, all right, that's fine. If you say no, we'll settle this with Pokemon battle. And so they throw Pokemon, and they want to get this person out. Thankfully, you're there to stop them. And you run them off, of course, because you are the hero, and they go back to their base. Because Team Star, even though they look like students, and they're student age, they don't go to the academy. And that's actually very important. They go to their own bases where they're set up around the island of Paldea. And Flame, I warned you they were going to be spoilers, okay? You say, imagine caring about spoilers, and then you say, wait, they're trying to recruit a student? Yes, they're trying to recruit a student. It's a spoiler. I warned you. I take no responsibility now. So anyway, after that, you get dragged into a whole thing where Team Star has been operating for a while, and they're becoming a problem because they keep trying to recruit students from the academy to join their teams. It's your job then to dismantle them. Hold on, need a drink. It turns out even I can't talk forever. And I'm really good at talking for a really long time. So anyway, you get tasked with dismantling Team Star. This is actually super easy because these guys are the honor before reason part, or kind of people. They have a code, and they're willing to stick with their code to their own detriment. In this case, the code is really simple. The leader is the strongest person in the entire team, which means that if you come and you beat the leader, congratulations, you are the leader. Team Star literally operates on Klingon promotion. And so it's your job to go through and beat all 5? I think it's 5. All 5 of the Team Star leaders and dismantle them. And along the way, every time you beat one, you get a little bit more of the backstory to Team Star. Specifically, where did they come from? How did they get here? And then most importantly at the end, why? Now the why, of course, here is the most important because it is the predicate for everything else that happened afterwards. So why did they do it? Why did they set up these bases outside of the school? Why, if they look like students, are they not in school? Why are they doing all of this? And this is where things are going to get dark. Like, I am not a person who normally puts up trigger warnings on things. There is a reason why there is a trigger warning on this video when I advertised it. Things are about to get very dark and very violent. The story of Team Star is this. Team Star were all students, and they were all misfits. The Fire Star base leader, I don't remember all their names, so don't ask me, I don't care. But the Fire leader was just kind of a mean girl, I guess, kinda, sorta. Let's see. The Dark guy, pretty sure it was Dark. Yeah, it was Dark. The Dark guy was a DJ. He was a music nerd. That's the best way to put it. He was a music nerd. The Poison guy was a theater nerd. The Fairy guy was a rich kid. And the... Bliss says it's Melly. I told you, I don't care. I'm not remembering their names. I don't remember names. Anyway, the Fairy guy was the rich kid. And the fighting girl was... I don't know what you call it. She's just different. I mean, she's a Hulk. She was easily one of the biggest people there. And so I guess because, you know, bigger than everybody else, you stand out. When you stand out, you get picked on. And that was the case for all of them. Every single one of them was getting bullied relentlessly in school. And of course, we've all dealt with that kind of thing before, unless you were the bully, in which case, if you're the bully, screw you. You're the bad guy here. Don't bully people. I mean, unless they need it, then bully them harder. I'm actually not a total opposition for bullying. I do believe that, you know, your skin does need to be toughened, but I think there's limits. And the obvious problem here is that there were no limits, because what happened is all of these students were getting bullied, and when they went to, you know, an authority figure, a teacher, the principal, the headmaster, anyone, nobody did anything about it. And some of the more astute among you, some of the more intuitive among you, might see where this is going already. I feel like Jeffrey is one of those people. So since nobody else was going to help them, they resolved to help themselves. See, individually, they were weak. They could be bullied. They could be picked on. Together, however, well, let's not forget, this is a Pokemon game. They had Pokemon. And Pokemon are lethal. So what they resolved to do is they put out a false trail. And they said that they were going to be in one particular place. Okay? And they did so in a way that their bullies would pick up on, knowing full well that once their bullies knew that they would be somewhere alone, vulnerable, their bullies would come to get them. In secret, however, they had all laid the same trail, and they would all be waiting in the same place when their bullies showed up. Now, of course, the intention here, being that this was a Pokemon game, is that they were going to throw out their Pokemon as a show of force and intimidation to warn their bullies off and make sure that they would never, ever harm them again. And of course it worked. Well, kinda. At the last moment it was called off. And the leader, who had been orchestrating the whole thing, decided that they couldn't go through with this anymore, and they took off. They disappeared. And so that left the rest of Team Star, the 5 people that we just talked about, and they said, well, what do we do? And they said, well, if we can't handle it here, then we're just going to have to leave. And so they did. They departed. They went their 5 different ways, but they kept in contact, and they started their star bases. And of course, the leader of Team Star vanished. The bullies were sent somewhere else so that this problem could never happen again. The school finally took notice after coming that close to having an incident. And they dodged it by that much. Of course, what incident do we mean? Well, this is not something that is completely unknown to us, because we've heard this story again and again and again and again. A student in school who has been bullied or picked on or ostracized or abused or something like this, who finally decides that it's no longer worth their time to endure it, there is no solution to it, and there is no other way out. They decide that if there's no other way out, they'll take themselves out. And they'll take everybody else who hurt them with them. What do I think that Team Star is? Well, Team Star are school shooters. We have to remember that, of course, this is a Pokemon game, and everything has been turned down to 5 from 10. See, in the real world, we have heard the story again and again and again. Somebody who is troubled or bullied or whatever, who eventually just takes a gun, goes to school, and just cuts loose. The first instance, of course, we had of this was Columbine. But it was not the last. It would not be the last, and it sure as hell is still going on today. I mean, oddly enough, it's hardly a day goes by that you don't hear about this happening somewhere or another. It shouldn't be happening, and we don't want it to happen, but it does. And I've talked about how each one of these villain teams represents something in the world that we should at least be aware of, if not something that we should struggle against. And in this case, we have a case of people who were bullied and who actually did decide that they were going to simply end it by taking action against their bullies in the most extreme way possible. Of course, in the story, they were stopped. But what if they hadn't been stopped? What would the result have been? Ostensibly, they said that they were just going to intimidate people, but the line between intimidation and actual violence is a very thin one. And it's really, really easy to cross over that line. I think that, and this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this, is because once I found out, who Team Star were and what they did, I said, well, that is exactly what's going on in the world right now, primarily in the US. And it made me think, Well, what about the other ones? And as I looked into it more, I realized that, yeah, every single one of these villain teams has been some kind of social commentary. Hence why I wanted to do this. It's very interesting, actually, to go back and look through all of these. Because I never actually expected to find some kind of social commentary in a Pokemon game of all things. Who would have? It's a game about capturing and battling monsters. But sometimes that's actually the best way to do it. There's a saying, it was made popular by Futurama, where they say if you do something right, nobody will be sure you've done anything at all. And I think this is one instance where the people who make Pokemon did it right. You see, if you were to go through and actually try to preach the message in these games, number one, it would probably be lost on a lot of the younger people in the games because they wouldn't understand these concepts. And when it comes to an older audience, they might be turned off from it because they simply don't want to be preached at. I know that I don't want to be preached at by anyone or anything. I really don't need to be preached at. I have my own morals, my own virtues and principles. I don't need anyone to give me theirs. But if you can show it without telling it, if you can make somebody think about it without actually having to say a word, well, now you're kind of onto something. Either that or I'm looking too much into it. But I do think that it's worth investigating, worth thinking about, worth pontificating on, hence why I'm here doing this. I do think there was a message in each one of them, and a caution in each one of them. Especially now, right now, and especially in Scarlet and Violet. When it comes to other things, when it comes to Team Flare, and their goal to reshape the world, they would have been right there. I think that's something we need to worry about. I do think that there are groups in the world, like the World Economic Forum, like the Davos Group, like the G20, who do think that they know how to better run your life than you know how to run your life. You are, of course, a stupid plebeian. They are the intellectual elite. They know better than you, and so you should do what they say. And if you won't do what they say voluntarily, well, there are ways to make you comply. But this is an existential crisis. This is something that you can't really fight against. They're going to come. Sooner or later, someday, they will come for you. And at that point, then you will have to address it. But while they're attending their summits and their conferences, surrounded by armed guards and military personnel in the most remote parts of Europe, there is nothing you can do about that. You should be aware of it, but there's nothing you can do about it. But you know what you can do something about? You can do something about them. You can do something about these activist groups who believe that they can use violence to actually make their goals happen. This is something that actually affects you directly. You can help secure your towns against criminals. You can, keep your own neighborhood watches, and you can prevent people from going through and smashing windows and burning buildings down. Every town has gangs. Gangs are a problem. And you'll never be able to get rid of gangs entirely, but at least if you're aware of it and you know what's going on, you can actually do something about this. I do believe that Flame said it best. The main villain of Sun and Moon were the poor. And that's actually the unfortunate part of many gangs. Many people go to gangs because they have basic needs and don't have any other way to get them. Maybe they don't have shelter. Maybe they don't have food. Maybe they feel like they're in danger from other people. And so they go to the gang to get those things. Is it the best option? Absolutely not. But it is an option. And if it's the easier option than other things, they'll take it. But perhaps by providing other opportunities, you can actually do something about this one. These people are hopeless. I have no solution here. No, there's just no solution here. Just beware. Don't do anything about them. Just avoid them as much as you can. The FBI will take care of them at some point. We've seen that. However, at the end of the day, I look at this one and I say, not only are they the most realistic villain that we have seen so far, they are perhaps the one villain, the one real-world villain that we've seen that we could actually do something about. And I don't need to expand too much on that. We all know what's going on. We know that the fabric of society is breaking down. We know that bullying has grown to epidemic proportions, and the severity of bullying has gone completely off the rails. The only way that bullying gets more severe at this point is if they actually just start murdering people. Because I've seen way too many videos of students who are being bullied, and when I say bullied, I mean beaten. As in, thrown into lockers, knocked to the floor, and then just curb stomped. Bullying could not get much more severe than it is now. And on a certain level, and I hate to say this, but on a certain level, when I hear about some school shooters, and I do hear about, the fact that they were being ostracized, they were being picked on, they were being bullied, harassed, everything else. And picked on and bullied are actually not even the right words, because the extent that quote-unquote bullies go to today is criminal. It would be criminal harassment under any other circumstance. When they say that they're going to pull a team star, yeah, I don't entirely blame them that much. I do. Don't get me wrong. I do believe that we are all responsible for our options. But when somebody is, or for our actions, but when somebody's put into that situation where they've been given no way out, yeah, I understand it. I understand it a lot. But this is one that we could do something about. I mean, we can do something about it by, if we're, one of those children, do something. Go to one of the adults in the area, go to a teacher, a principal, go to the police. Like, if your teacher or principal won't do anything about it, go to the police and tell the police what's going on. And at least, if the police won't do anything about it, you can put it on them then and say, look, when nobody else would do anything, we went to you. You didn't do anything, it's now your fault. Or if you are an adult right now and you hear about this kind of thing going on, take it seriously. Most of us do at this point, I think, take all of these seriously. But sometimes we think our hands are tied. Sometimes we think there's nothing we can do. Or maybe you think it's not as serious as it seems. I guarantee it's absolutely as serious as it seems. While I am actually kind of on board with a certain amount of hazing, a certain amount of bullying, I have not seen that kind of thing in years. No, we don't have bullying anymore. We have outright antagonistic harassment. And yeah, there's no place for that. So anyway, I think it's about time for me to wrap this up. I thought it was fascinating when I looked into the Pokemon games and I saw how many real-world parallels there were and how much caution was being expressed through them. The only one that I can argue I might have looked into too much was Diamond and Pearl, because back in 2006 we had no idea what virtual reality was going to turn into now, and the idea of transhumanism was still very much the realm of science fiction. It's only in the last couple of years that those things have turned into what could turn into an existential crisis where we could have entire populations living in virtual reality and potentially all under the singular control of one person. As far as everything else goes, however, I think I was pretty spot on with those. So I hope that I've given you something to consider today. I hope that perhaps if you enjoyed this breakdown of Pokemon, maybe you can look at some of the other media in your life and see what other parallels can you find. This is actually part of critical thinking that used to be taught in literature, where you would try to look at what an author has written, you know, like in a book. Remember books? I remember books. And you would try to say, what was the symbolism here? What were the themes that they were going for? What other parallels can we take from this story? We just did the same thing here with a Pokemon game. You can do it with any media, really. So, do that. Take that away. If you find anything else that you think is really interesting, either another take on Pokemon that maybe I missed, or if you find other media that you think had a really cleverly hidden warning, influence, something like that. If you think that you found something else, let me know down in the comments, because I'd love to hear about it. It doesn't count if it's like right there out in the open. Like if you go to the movie Elysium and try to tell me, hey, I think Elysium might be about classism, I'm going to say, oh, no. I totally missed that there were any kind of class structures in the movie Elysium. How did you find that? No, it doesn't count if it's like shoved in your face repeatedly. And Tuck says, no time to think critically. You gotta find time to think critically. Because it's a skill that is desperately missing. All of your modeling practice is gonna do you like less good than the ability to think critically in a stupid world. And we are becoming a stupid world. Work on the critical thinking. It'll save your life. Anyway, that's where I'm going to sign off of here. So, if you've enjoyed this, and you're not already, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon so you get notified of everything. When it comes to the live streams, I do try to advertise them ahead of time, but if I don't get around to it, hopefully the bell icon will still work. If you know somebody else who might enjoy this because they're like a Pokemon freak, and maybe they would like to hear about this kind of thing, share this video with them. Otherwise, just leave a like on the stream or the video afterwards. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you next time for whatever I do next week. I haven't figured that out yet. So until the next lecture, take care. Oh, and Flame, you would know what he's modeling if you would just join the Discord server. Join the Discord server. You join the Discord server. I'll see you next time. Take care.